And welcome back, and a good day to all. And what you're seeing is the inside of our 2016 2500. And as promised in previous video from our red Ram, I'd commented that we had some upgrades coming for this truck. And one of those upgrades has arrived. And what we're going to do, just like we did on our red Ram, if you remember on our Project Candy Apple, we switched out the entire interior with a sport interior, which meant we got the leather seats, we got a full floor center console, we were able to wire in and have access to factory controlled heated and ventilated seats. Well, what we're going to do on our 2500 here today is that we're going to look at getting this center jump seat out and replace it with a full floor console. Now, you have a lot of storage space, at least in this particular 2500 center console. You've got the space here, and you got access to kind of a storage area underneath. You got a USB port and other USB port and a charging port up here in the top corner. You can see another lever here, and that gets you into another storage spot. You can see right down there. And at least on this particular 2500, you also have an additional kind of a little tray of space here. Now, I like the center consoles a bit better than these center jump seats, especially if I'm never going to use this as a center jump seat, which I hardly ever do, because there's not much you can kind of put here other than maybe a car seat. What I like about the center consoles is it gets everything up a bit taller, so it's a bit easier to reach from the driver's vantage point, as well as the storage space here is deeper than it is on these jump seats. But anyway, with that being said, we've got a couple things to keep in mind. And one of them being is that we have aftermarket heated seats in this Ram, and they're put out by Cat Skin. And we've had them in here since we got the truck back in 2016. Now, I say that because you can see we've got the power switch here for the heated seat on the passenger side, just kind of stuck into this lower piece of trim. There's one here on the driver's side for the driver's side front. And we also had heated seats added to the rear buckets in the back, and those are actually attached to the rear of this jump seat. So we got a little bit of extra wiring to account for in this one that if you're doing this job you may not have, simply because our heated seats are aftermarket. Typically you would only have the electrical for the USB ports up here at the top. So what we're going to start with is we're going to need to take this piece of trim off of here. This little cubby hole, this little tray additionally at here at the bottom will also go, as well as this bottom piece of trim here, which again we have to account for our power switches. We're more than likely going to have to lengthen these wires and relocate these switches, power switches for the heated seats. I've got an idea where I want to put them, and I'll show that to you when we get the new console in here. But when you're going to do these console swaps, you need to make sure that you get the center console, all the trim pieces. There's a front and rear bracket, as well as you're going to need the trim piece for the dash, because this is going to be different. The center of the floor console's trim piece mates up with this piece in the dash, and it's shaped slightly differently, and I'll show you all that when we get to it. Now, the one I'm going to show you, the one I got from off of eBay, which came all as a kit, it's got the, I believe you call it Laramie trim level options. So it's got all the extra buttons down here for if you had factory heated and ventilated seats and factory steering wheel, as well as it's got options for dual zone automatic climate control. And you can see that we really had just a single zone kind of manual knob style temperature control in this one. Now, one of the future upgrades we're looking into, and we may be able to use the radio you see here to do this, or we may not. We're going to have to try it, is We'll swap all this out for now and keep the exact options, switches, and trim. Everything we see here, we're going to swap over to the new center dash bezel. But in the future, we are looking at another upgrade for this particular Ram to potentially add at least single zone automatic temperature control, and or at least single zone that has the the push buttons left and right versus the manual knob that you see here. So all the extra switches and options we take off the donor panel, we'll keep all those for a future endeavor, and I'll cover all that with you. Now the 1500, 2500s, and I believe the 3500s all do this. Part of what mounts this center console is, you'll see right here, you got one here in the front that bolts into the rail for the front passenger seat, and there's one further back more towards the rear. So there's two bolts here that come off, that are attached to a couple of studs that come off the center jump seat. So there's about 4 bolts that we need to remove, and we may have to take the bolt out at least and loosen up this seat in order to give us wiggle room to get those studs free. If not, if we can get those nuts off of the studs without having to loosen up the seat, we may be able to take this center console, push it towards the driver's seat, and kind of angle it up, just kind of take it and rotate it this way to get those studs to clear. But if we have to loosen up the seats, we will. I'd just rather try to avoid that, at least for now, if at all possible. But I figured what we could do is that we can start getting the pieces off we know that we're going to need to take off, and that's going to be this front bezel trim. And that's one of the reasons why we didn't, when we put our cell phone holder in here from ProClip, we didn't undo the double-sided sticky tape. So that way we can just kind of do this, take it, pop this straight off, and you can see we still have our protective strip there, because we kind of knew we were going to do some of these upgrades here in the future. Now, just like the 1500s, there's a piece of trim here. This comes up. There's a couple of Torx bits you can see down in here. Those need to come up. And we're going to reuse this piece because unfortunately the kit that I purchased, although it is a very nice and very clean looking setup, whatever they took it out of was a nice clean donor, it was missing this piece, so we'll just kind of reuse this one, as well as the mounting screws at the top. So we got our 2 Torx bits there. If you have the power option here, if you pull up this piece of just kind of rubberized bottom, you'll see another Torx bit. Let me get you some light right down in there that needs to come out. I believe that is the only 3. So the 2 Torx at the top and the 1 Torx in this cubby hole. And then we should just be able to grab this piece of trim, kind of pull it forward a little bit, and then start disconnecting all of our electrical. We're going to need to transfer over a lot of this particular module here. This got our 115 volt plug on it, the selector switch for our 4-wheel drive, and again, we'll cover all this when we get to it. But I'm going to go ahead and just take a Torx bit and start getting a lot of these fasteners out of here. Now this video may end up being multiple parts depending on how long this is going to go, or I may just do this as one big long video, and we can, you can always use the option just to kind of fast forward to what you need to see. I'm going to try a T15. I'll bet you, if anything, it's pretty standard with using T15s and all of these. Yeah, it's a T15. Okay, so T15 Torx there, and the 2 at the top. So let me get these fasteners out of here, and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So you can see that we started to get we got our center trim piece here broke free. And once you get the 2 screws at the top and the one that was right here above the plug undone, it will pull free. Now, it was easier to remove this piece of trim from the top and it just unclips from the front and then rolls out of a set of clips in there in the back. And once you have that, you can kind of use it as a handhold and just a trim removal tool, and was able to come through here to the sides and kind of start breaking this free. Now if you're doing this kind of in the cold like we are today, it's a bit chilly this morning, we're starting to get into our spring/summer. Just be careful when you're manipulating your plastics, especially older plastics, and especially with it being cold, they don't like to move as much. So we definitely don't want to crack or break something, even though we know that we're not going to be putting this particular piece of trim back in, but it's still a usable piece of trim in case we have to go back to it, or somebody else needs to use it. But this gives us enough room that we can get in here, start disconnecting our electrical. So I'm going to work on that now, and then we should just be able to then completely remove this center piece. So let me do that and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So you can see we got all of our electrical undone, so that gives us access to our trim piece there. And it's not too bad, just fairly standard, just pushing tabs to unlock connectors. None of these have like the Chrysler locks on them that you had to undo first, at least not on this particular setup. Now we're not replacing the radio as of yet. The radio is staying put, so that'll stay there for now. And it also means that what we're going to have to do is swap over the center black piece of trim out of that main piece of trim, because we need to make sure that our trim piece there, is the proper trim piece to fit around our radio, because we've got the smaller touch screen on this one now. And one of the future upgrades we are looking into is going with the bigger, I think the 8.4 inch touch screen display, which will then also integrate better for us when we look into going over to the push button climate control instead of the manual selector knob. Now this radio may be capable of displaying the temperature, because a lot of the times it's just turning the option on in the truck to get the radio to recognize the feature is there. So we may not have to change out this radio. It's something we're going to have to look into, but that's a whole later conversation. Let's see here. So everything else to get these off, because these USB port here and this keyed power port over here are going to have to go again, like we said earlier, along with this center tray. And this is all these small bolts, just like it was on the 1500, and I believe those are all 8mm. May even be, they might be 7s. Yeah, 8's too big. Let's try a 7. Yeah, they're all 7mm. So I'm going to take some 7mm bolts out of here and disconnect some of our electrical, and then we'll go from there. Now what's going to happen is, if it's just like the 1500, and I haven't checked yet, I will do that here shortly. The center console, when you go to a whole floor console, its connection for its power ports don't happen up here with the trim. It actually happens underneath the driver's seat. There should be a plug there, that with existing plug, hopefully it's there, that we can plug into, which is going to mean that although we're going to disconnect these, they're just not going to be used. So basically the connectors are just kind of sit there behind the scenes and kind of not plug into anything. By the way, let me get some bolts, get this tray out of here, and start tearing more of this bolting apart, and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So still in the process of getting these ports out of here. And one difference so far that's here that's unlike the 1500. On the 1500 that we worked on the couple of 1500s we worked on, these ports were actually separate. So they had kind of a bolt here at the top and a bolt here at the bottom, and the entire piece would come out. And it looks like on this one, these ports and this center tray are all the same component. So we went ahead and popped the lower trim piece off. You can see here so we can check for some fasteners. Now this is what I was talking about earlier. You can see they wired and located the switches for those Catskins seat heaters into here. But the nice thing about the Catskin product is that you can see there's a disconnect there, so we can easily just disconnect our switches. And I do have new replacement switches coming in the event that, you know, we should need to use them. So what I'm going to do is just uncouple our wiring connector there, and we may not have to extend that wiring now that I'm looking at it, because it just comes off. All the relays and the power feeds are underneath the seats, and the switch wiring just runs up this way. So since we're putting the center console in, we may be able to pull that wiring back up underneath the carpet and kind of run it up this way and get it to come out where we want it inside the what will be the new center console. But again, it'll be an item we'll have to look into. So let me get these connectors unplugged. We'll get this trim out of here. I'm gonna look for some fasteners, and it looks like there may be some underneath here. Yeah, it looks like there's a couple. I'll bring you back and show you those fasteners, and we'll continue to get this center drawer / port piece out of here. One moment. And welcome back. So there's one of these 8mm bolts on either corner underneath the left and right hand side, underneath that trim piece, and then this whole piece will kind of start to come out. Now you still have the wiring for your port over here, and we have wiring for USB port over here. Now unfortunately they didn't put a release on the back of that connector for that USB port that I could see. The release for that connector, I don't know who thought this was a good idea, but hopefully you can see it there. It is right on, and I'll try to touch it with the flashlight. It's right underneath this loom. You see this wiring harness you see rolling here on the top. Directly underneath that, it looks like a little black cylinder. Probably not coming through too well, but you can kind of see it like right below here. See, I'll touch it with the flashlight. Right there. And that's where that release is at. So what I'm in the process of doing is trying to pop the Christmas tree clip off of that connector so I can get some slack on it and hopefully get to the other side of it and release it from the wiring harness, because it's just a big piece of pigtail that goes from the back of the USB connector on this one up here. And we have this little cubby hole above the glove box. Now in order to get this cubby hole out, be warned, the 1500s do this as well, is that you kind of have to pull the glove box out of the way a little bit, and underneath this cubby hole right about the center is I think it's either a bolt or a screw, one of the two, that you got to take out, and that'll allow you to pull this out. Now once we have this out, we can kind of reach into here and get access to that connector to unclip it. So that's what I'm working on now, is getting this little cubby hole out of here, and then I'll bring you back. One moment. So I just wanted to show this to you. To get these glove boxes out, and you've seen me do this before, if you have this on the right hand side, sometimes there's a little braking mechanism here. It kind of slows down the closure of the glove box. That just unclips from the side of the glove box. You squeeze the two sides together, and the whole glove box will come down as assembly, and you can get it out of here. So you can see that we do have the glove box removed. And if we look up here, let me get you tilted up where you can see it. You can see that there's our bolt right there that we need to remove. We need to get that out of there. Sorry, you fell backwards a little bit. Need to get that out of there. And then the rest of what holds this cubby hole in is just clips. So let me get the bolt out. We'll get this removed. If you have the upper trim model, there may also be a light in this corner, so just be mindful of that. Be mindful of any electrical, and it does. Yeah, we don't have a light there. We just have a cap covering up the hole. Okay, so let me work on that. I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So you can see we got a cubby hole out. The nice thing about having the glove box is you can come underneath and kind of push forward on this cubby hole, and it'll help these clips to release. But that's the bolt you're taking out. So you can see the fastener on the back of that. And if you don't take this out, you can inadvertently pull this fastener through the plastic and break it. I mean, I'm sure they did it for engineering reasons, security, stability. I'm not sure, but I'm not sure why they felt the need to bolt this little piece of plastic into such a beefy mount. But either way, and you can see right over here, let me get you some light. There we go. And that USB connector is right there. There, you can probably see that a little bit better now. You can see it kind of looks like a black cylindrical connector, and it looks like it unplugs from a harness on this other side over here. So that's what I'm working on unclipping, and that will finally disconnect our USB port. So yeah, unfortunately, at least where this is situated, you kind of have to take the glove box and the cubby hole out to get to the electrical connector for a USB port down here. Either way. The other thing, I did check underneath the driver's seat, and we'll cover this more when we get to it. And yes, the electrical for this seat does go underneath the driver's seat, because remember, we do have a USB port and such up here, and that USB connection and a couple of other electrical connections all go underneath the driver's seat, just like it did on the 1500. So it looks like we'll just be swapping the connector that's on here for the connector that'll come on the replacement console. So we'll just have to keep an eyeball on it and make sure all our wiring matches up. But either way, I'm going to work on getting this connector unplugged, and then we'll get our power disconnected from our other port on the other side here, and then we'll get this out of here. So one moment. And welcome back. So you can see we've got our piece out, and again, this is all one piece, center drawer, ports. And just to show you what we were dealing with back there behind that glove compartment, there's your connector. And yes, the Christmas tree clip broke when I was taking it off the mount it was on, but no harm, no foul. It didn't damage the connector. Plus, remember, we're not going to use these connectors anyway. They're going to be replaced by the console. But just to show you that this is just a powered port, power USB port. This is not data. Because there's your connector there that was plugged into it. So you can see you just got a positive and a negative. So it was just being used for power. Now what we can do, because that is power, so all they were doing, like in the days of old, what would happen is this connector would be routed down here, and you would come out to another just standard, what you might call a cigarette lighter port, or old school terminology would be cigarette lighter port, because it would look like that. And you would just have another one over here, and this one would be a keyed source of 12 volts, and this one is a constant source of 12 volts, if I remember correctly. So rather than this, which they were doing this for convenience, they just fed it into an adapter for you from the factory and came out to a USB port, so you can charge a phone and plug something directly into it without having to have an adapter. So normally what would happen is this would just get routed down here, and again plug into one of those other type connectors. Either way, now we might be able to use this for something in the future. Now you could see you got enough length in the wire here, especially if you were just to pop this little USB adapter out. You can actually technically just kind of, in our case, since we don't have the light inside the cubby hole here, we can run this wiring through where the light would normally be and just have an extra like little USB port just kind of sitting inside the cubby hole if we wanted to use it. But either way, we got a source of 12 volts here, constant source of 12 volts that we could use for something. And this is the keyed source of 12 volts, again, that we won't necessarily be using because again, this is going to have a console that'll be here and kind of covering all this up, because you're going to have a bracket that goes across here that bolts into, and you can see that it looks like, yeah, I'm going to have to get some kind of bolts to fit sorry, some kind of nuts to put on the other side of this to fit, because usually what comes in here is a square insert that just pops in place and it gives you something to bolt that front bracket into. But no harm, no foul. We can cover it with a set of washers instead of bolts and get around that. But with all of this finally being out of here and getting this piece squared away, what we can do is we can now focus our attention on this piece here. And first thing I'm going to do is just disconnect all the electrical that's underneath the driver's seat. I'll see if I can kind of squeeze us all underneath there to see that. But there's 3 plugs, it looks like. It looks like there's the power, then there's a separate USB plug, because this is actually a data USB port as well as power, not just power. And then of course there's a 3rd plug down there as well. But let me pause you, let me go get a shop light, and we'll see if we can take a look at that. So one moment. And welcome back. So we're underneath the packed driver's seat here, sorry. And there's 3 connectors that are on this pillar here. You can see these one here, the pinks with yellow stripes are usually power. That's coming off the harness. It looks like it's going to our center jump seat. We've got our USB port that's extended out into here, and then we've got a 3rd connector there on the side. So it looks like they've got 3 connectors total that make up the harness that goes into that center console. So I'm going to work on getting these disconnected and popped off of our holder here, and then we can work on getting more of our seat disconnected and figure out exactly where it's bolted in place. So let me get these disconnected. Again, 3 of them. We're all right here on this pillar underneath the driver's seat. It is helpful to kind of push the driver's seat all the way back as far as you can to get the connectors out of here. So I'm going to get these taken care of, and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. It's a little bit of a delay. Sorry, neighbor was getting his grass cut, so I didn't want to record with all the background noise. But I want to show you what we've done thus far. Just working on the center console still, seeing what we need to do to get it the rest of the way out of here. So we went ahead and just pulled our electrical through from the last clip. This is what you saw us disconnect. That's going to go up to the USB port that's on the top part of this center jump seat. Looks like you got a connector here with just 2 wires in it. That's going to be power of some kind. And it looks like you've got another set of power as well as 4 wires there in the center. This also has an audio jack for audio input on the top, so that's going to probably account for at least 3 of the 4 strands there in the center. But either way, that's all 3 connectors for the center seat. Now we went ahead, if you remember, it had a tray up here up front, which is this tray here. It just nestled in there like that. Pull up this piece of rubber trim on the bottom, and that exposed 2 bolt holes here in the corners, and we can kind of get that out of the way. And yes, those were a different size. Those were actually 8mm there. That got this piece out of the way for us, which then exposed one of the main mounting bolts here. So it looks like we got a mounting bolt here, one back here in the rear corner to get to, and of course the spots that it bolts through on the passenger rail. You can see you got a little bit of space and some give in the seat here. Once we get all the bolts undone, there might be enough give to kind of slide the console this way towards the driver's seat and then pick it up and out. But if, like I said, if we have to loosen up the passenger seat, then we will. But what we're working on next, let me bring you here to the back. There were 2 Phillips screws here in the back on this back piece of vent trim. See here, left and right. That allowed this whole piece to drop down, and then we can get to the rest of our wiring for our aftermarket heated seats. So it's got the same plug arrangement as it did up front. So I'm going to get these unplugged and get this out of here. Now, if you're doing this, and obviously you're not going to have any electrical back here, you don't necessarily have to drop this piece out, but it might make getting to the bolt that's over here in the far corner a bit easier, because it's right there. I can kind of barely reach it, and we should be able to get a ratchet on it and kind of break that free. Let's see. So yeah, let me do that. Let me get that electrical undone, get that out of here. That should be the last of our electrical, and I'll start working on seeing if we can get those bolts broken out of here. Actually, not broken, I should say, broken free and removed. So one moment. And welcome back. So just want to show you we're getting these bolts out. The two main bolts here on the driver's side for this center jump seat. It's easier to get to this back bolt if you just take the driver's seat, just as you see here, and move it all the way forward. And you can see you got nice access to that bolt in the rear. And then of course you've got your other bolt there, which was underneath that trim. So we're just in the process of getting the two bolts, or I should say, I think there's 4 of them total, removed, that bolt this to the passenger side seat rail. So let me pause you and I'll show you that. One moment. And welcome back. So as promised, you can kind of see the socket right there sitting on the second bolt up here at the front, and they're fairly small. I think those are 10 millimeter, if I remember correctly. Let's just look at the socket here. Yes, 10 millimeter. You can see it's not very big. It's just I think it's probably 2 studs here in the front and 2 studs there in the back, if I remember correctly. And from what I can see, actually, it looks like it's a little bit bigger studs in the back. Those look to be maybe 13 millimeter. Let me see if I can get you down there to kind of see what I'm seeing. Let's get some light. Nope. Yeah, it's hard to see, hard to get you to see it, but it's right underneath the post for the rear left seat bolt on the passenger side. There's 2 more studs that come through, similar to the way it does here in the front. And like I said, it looks like those are about 13 millimeter, but it looks like you've got enough space you can kind of reach in from the back of the seat to get those to be undone. So I'm going to work on getting these 4 bolts out of here. I'll confirm with you once I have them out what those 2 rear bolts there were. And again, they look to be a little bit bigger than the front one. So I'm going to continue to work on this, and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. Well, unfortunately, there's just too tight of a space and too odd of an angle to try to break the torque on the nuts here up front, and I didn't want to damage them or strip them. So I did inadvertently go through and at least loosen up the seat bolts in this seat so that we can potentially move the seat around. Not looking to remove it from the vehicle, but we did take the bolts out to give us some extra leverage. So we should now be able to kind of, pick up on the seat like that and be able to get much easier access to those fasteners to get that center console the rest of the way out of there. Now, I didn't want to do this because depending on where your vehicle is at, even a southern vehicle, these seat bolts can get pretty rusted in a position. So just make sure that if you're going to do this, that you soak them down with plenty of penetrant. You may have to do a little bit of heat. Now, the ones up front here, unfortunately, are in kind of in an encapsulated channel, and you can't really get on them, but these tend to break loose pretty easily. I usually don't have a problem with them. It's usually the rear ones. They go all the way through and poke out from underneath because they get exposed to the elements that become an issue. So again, make sure you spray them down with plenty of lube if you have to do this. And if you're loosening these up, impact helps. I did break them loose with a 1/2-inch breaker bar by hand first, just to make sure that they were going to rotate okay. Because if you're pulling these out, if you've ever had a bolt do this, where it comes out fine, all of a sudden gets real tight again, just stop at that point and kind of, you know, run it back in and clean those threads up before you attempt to keep taking it out. Otherwise, it may seize up, you know, halfway through taking it out, and now you're in kind of a pain, which is why I usually don't like playing around with removing seat bolts, especially on northern vehicles where the corrosion's even worse, because you can get yourself in a pickle, especially if one of these breaks or seizes up on you. But in our case, you know, we're pretty close to the south here. As you can see, these bolts are actually pretty good. They're not in terrible shape. That one's a little bit worse. So we'll make sure we douse these thoroughly with some penetrant before we put them back in. But for now, you know, so you can see, once again, we can pick up on our seat, which will give us plenty of access to get the rest of those console bolts out of this rail and hopefully get this console out of here. So we're going to concentrate on that next, and I'll bring you right back. One moment. And welcome back. So I figured I'd show you a little bit better view of what we're talking about here. So we just gotta, using our socket set here as kind of a prop, just holding the seat up a little bit, and you can better see those two studs that come out front there, just slightly underneath the passenger rail there, and the two in the back. So the two in the fronts are 10s, and the two in the back, which we're going to attempt to tackle next, are 13s. So once we get that out, we should be able to finish picking up the seat. As you kind of see here, just get those studs to clear the rails and we should be good. Now this piece of ductwork kind of popped out on its own when we picked up on the console, which is fine, because remember, this is going to get replaced. Actually, this whole piece of ductwork that you see that plugs in to this area up here is going to get replaced, because there's a small piece of ductwork on the bracket that goes here, and it eventually connects to a new piece of ductwork that'll be on the center console, and that's how we get ventilation out of those vents in the back. So once again, two 10s in the front, two 13s in the rear. We're going to get those 13 millimeter nuts off the back, and then we'll should be able to get the rest of this center console out of here finally. So we're going to concentrate on that, and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So we got all four nuts taken off, the front and the rear, and it's easier to see it on this one. I don't know if you can see where that nut is kind of elongated. They use these pinch lock nuts where they just kindly slightly just squish it, and that way when you thread it on, it kind of deforms the thread on that stud just a little bit and kind of serves as kind of like a Loctite. So when you're spinning these off, you kind of have to twist them to loosen them up, and if you try spinning them by hand, you'll hit that elongated section and they tighten up, and then you just got to put a ratchet on it again and just kind of try to keep spinning it off that way. But with all four of those fasteners out, you can see now that we can kind of push our center console out of the way. So it's going to be kind of hard for me to show this on camera, because I need to jiggle the seat and the center console at the same time and slide this thing out of here. But that's what we're going to do. The seat's loose. I'm going to pull it this way towards the door. That'll get it out of the way, and then we can push the center console towards the driver's seat, and that should get those studs to clear, and we can finally get that thing out of here. So we're going to focus on that. I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So I just want to show you here, it does work, and it is needed, like I said, unfortunately, to have at least the seat bolts out. We do have electrical disconnected, so we got a little bit more room here to play with. But as you can see, we're getting the studs to clear. It's just a matter of kind of pushing the passenger seat backwards, and that gives you enough room to kind of get these studs to clear out. So we've got the front undone. I think the back one is almost clear, if not clear. Yeah, the back one's clear at this point. So we kind of just have the center console pushed forward, and it's just catching here on the passenger seat. But like I said, it can be done. Just take your time with it. It's kind of a little bit of a puzzle, but I'm gonna need to get in the back seat there to help finish pull this center console the rest of the way out of here. Like I said, I'm just rolling the center console backwards. Just be mindful of all your wiring harnesses and such that may be underneath here. You know, we don't want to inadvertently hit something like the body computer. I believe that's the BCM, the body control module. You know, we just don't want to hit any of this and, you know, nick a wire or anything. But yeah, okay, so we're almost out. We're going to continue to work on this, and I'll bring you back once it's out. One moment. And welcome back. Well, as you can see, the old jump seat is out of here, and we'll do a comparison with the old jump seat and the new center console here in a bit. And yeah, things escalated a little bit. You know, AKA happened to take loose the passenger seat, but it did help quite a bit to have this seat loose and wobbly in order to clear everything to get that console out. We didn't have to do anything with the driver's seat, thankfully, other than move it forward. So once again, we could get to that back bolt there. So now the next piece we're looking at for removal, because we don't need it, we actually need it to be out of here, is this center piece of ducting that connects up right here. Because remember, the brace piece is going to have a short piece of ducting on it, and then that finally attaches to the piece that's underneath the full console. It doesn't look like it's actually held in with any Christmas tree clips. It's just the pressure of the carpet that seems to be holding it down. So I'm thinking, yeah, we may have to remove this kick panel over here on the passenger side and kind of roll the carpet back a little bit just to take some pressure off of here. And I'm going to go with the passenger. I'm going to try with just the passenger side, since we have the passenger seat once again loose at this point. And then hopefully rolling the carpet back a little bit will take the pressure off of this ductwork, and we can just, you know, pull it out this direction, because again, we're not going to need it. I mean, you could, I guess you could, if we needed to, in theory, rather than messing around with everything on the driver's side and pulling the carpet back, we could pull the carpet back a little bit, but barring doing that or this side, you could, in theory, just kind of slice the carpet kind of up the middle and just fold it back on the sides, because the center console is going to cover all this. It's going to come pretty much right about here to the edge where the old trim you see here was setting for that little pencil holder type thing that was on the front of that old center jump seat. So if you cut it right down here in the very center and just kind of fold everything back together before you put the console in, I mean, no one's ever going to see it. But we'll try to do it without cutting the carpet first. But if we have to, we will. Because yeah, there's not even any padding. There's no padding between the carpet and the top of that duct. That's just pressure. It seems holding that in place at this point. At least it looks to be just pressure. Okay, so I'm going to concentrate on this piece, and then once we get it out of here, I'll bring you back and kind of show you what we kind of ended up with. So one moment. And welcome back. So in the process of pulling up the carpet to look to see the getting that piece of ductwork out, it got us access to the third-party wiring that's used for the heated seat elements. Now, I didn't do the install of the heated seats in this vehicle. It was actually done by the dealership as part of the negotiation to purchase this vehicle back originally in 2016. And yes, the dealership that I go to does install aftermarkets. I don't know if they still are, but they were kind of a reseller for Cat Skin at the time. So they opted to do the install again as part of the purchasing decision. Now, this is our switch end, if you remember, our switch pigtail end. And but while digging through the carpet here, I found the relay. The power relay for the passenger side heated seat elements was kind of just stashed over here in the corner where they had space, and it looked like they did it that way because they kind of ran out of wire length, and they couldn't get the relay, enough wire length on the relay to kind of just sit in a nice open spot underneath the seat where, you know, it wouldn't be bothered. Well, I didn't want the relay to sit here hidden, not knowing there was a relay there until about, you know, maybe an hour ago. So we found a tie wrap we can cut. We found where they tapped power for the passenger side here. You can see there's a fuse here. Not too thrilled about a fuse being underneath the carpet, but not really much I can do about that other than you know, rewiring where they tap their power from, which is not an endeavor I want to get into. We're just going to have to remember that, you know, there's a fuse here. So if the heated seats on the passenger side stop working, we know our fuse is located right about here. It's not too tedious to get to because it's easy enough to kind of pull the carpet back even with the seat installed, so it's not terrible. Originally it was kind of up here in the footwell, but we cut a tie wrap there to give us the extra slack, and then we ended up pulling the wiring harness for the relay through the existing cutout in the carpet for the factory harness. So this will now sit underneath here. We'll plug the relay back in, and those are the two connections to the heated seat elements. And then what we're going to do with this one, this goes to our switch. We're going to follow the channel this way where the wiring, existing factory harness is at, and kind of come out in the center opening there, and then that should give us enough length to get to where we want to mount our switches inside of the new console. So it was actually you know, a good thing that we did take this passenger seat loose, because we needed to get access into all this wiring. It wasn't until we rolled the carpet back that I realized they tapped power from this side, ran the power this way, and they went this way underneath the carpet. I thought maybe they were kind of coming up through the center and up to where that switch was at, but occasionally not the case. But again, this is not a dig on the individual that installed it. We're just, again, rerouting the wiring to make it a bit easier to get to these components, a bit more streamlined, and again, making sure that our relay stays nice and safe and, you know, isn't tucked out under here anymore. So that's what I'm going to continue to do. We're going to have to do the same thing to the driver's side over there. We're going to need to see how they ran the cabling. After looking at this one, we now know that the two connections go into the heated seat element, pass into this relay, and if I remember correctly, the relay for the driver's side is actually underneath the seat. So I'm hoping they came up the center channel, but again, we'll find out when we get the carpet pulled up a little bit. But I'm going to finish getting this wire, again, run this way, follow the existing factory harness, and we'll come out the center, and then I'll bring you back when we continue to work on getting that piece of ductwork out. So one moment. And welcome back. So we worked on our driver's side, and as you can see, we've got our wiring rerouted. This is just going to follow the path that the console wiring did, because it does, if you remember, it has 3 electrical connections, at least on the one we took out, that kind of follow the rear corner, go down this way, and then go underneath. So we're going to do the same thing with the controls, but we did get them pulled out from the corner they were in, which was over here in the front, back underneath the carpet, and kind of underneath the seat a little bit better. And in the process, we did find out where they were tapping power for the heated seats on the driver's side, as well as the location of its relay. Now, one of these days, unfortunately not in this video, not at this time, but if we can score ourselves a Laramie interior, meaning the full dash as well as the seats, we may come in here and kind of revisit this and pull all the seats out, pull the carpeting up, and kind of redo things a little bit, because what will happen is we'll be able to go with factory seats rather than these aftermarket. So we'll pull all this wiring out of here. And yes, and don't worry, before we put the new console in here and button everything up, I will take a vacuum cleaner and take advantage of the ability to kind of vacuum in between these, in between the console and the side of the seat, which is sometimes really hard to get to. But anyway, we're working on our vent here, and it looks like there's a clip on either side of it, and whoever was in here last didn't put the little speed nuts back in place, so the vent is literally just sitting down on a couple of studs that come up from the body and then plug into the vent here. So we're just pulling on the carpet, and you can see we've got it rolled up a little bit on the driver and passenger side just to give us some slack in here. We should be able to pick that ductwork up off of the stud again that's here and here, and just kind of pull it this way to get it out. Probably the easier thing to do, like I said earlier, is just to kind of cut the carpet just gingerly. Make sure you don't hit a wiring harness or anything on top of here. There isn't one, but just make sure, obviously, before you do any cutting. Probably the easier thing to do, like I said, is just slice the carpet down here in the center, peel it back from side to side, pull your duct out, because once you put your console in there, you're not going to see it. But I wanted to see if it was possible to get it out of there without doing it. And if you pull enough slack, you can get the speed nut out. You're probably not going to be able to see it, but one of them is right here. You can see it underneath the carpet there. It's got a set of ears and just stud, and the other one's over here on this side. So again, I'm going to continue to kind of fight with this, get a little bit more slack in this carpet, and we should be able to get that duct out. So I'll bring you right back. One moment. And welcome back. So I just want to show you this here. You see we were able to kind of get this to come out of here. There is a wiring harness on this side, on the driver's side here, so just make sure you don't snag up on the left side ear here. But once we can get clear of everything, then we can kind of just gingerly pull this thing out, and there you go. That's it. That is the piece that we only need if the center console is the jump seat, because again, if you remember, the jump seat only comes about this far versus the console that will go the entire way. So what we got to do now is kind of fight with our carpet, get it to relax, get everything to fall back into place, because we don't need to put anything underneath there. It's going to be a little, you know, a little wobbly, I guess, a little bit. There's going to be a little bit of a hollow area here because it doesn't have that duct to rest on. So there may be a piece of foam or something that's probably here if you do have a full console. But again, once we get the carpet and everything down and get the console back in, you won't see this centerpiece anyway. But you can get it out. You can get it out in one piece. Again, just be mindful of this wiring harness that runs on this side. And also, again, you can see there's two ears there. There's two clips. And I don't know if there's supposed to be speed nuts on it or not, but there wasn't in this case. It was literally just pushed down over top of it. So I'm going to get the carpet back in place, and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. Well, we got you in the garage now that we have our center jump seat removed, and we've got it sitting side by side with what we're going to be going back in with. And this is what is considered a floor console or a center console, whatever terminology you'd like to use. But you can see the distinct difference between the two. Obviously, it's not meant to be used as a jump seat. And just like we did within, sorry for the noise, just like we did with the Candy Apple here, you'll notice it has a lot more storage space, more easily accessible to the driver than what you get kind of with the jump seat there. Again, not that lifting up the top of it is cumbersome in any way, but like I said, you get a bit more space with it because obviously you don't have the seat area here. Now this is pretty kind of the same as far as the top goes. We still have a USB port up here at top. We've got our auxiliary jack, and we've got another USB port here. One of these I believe will be powered, and the other one should be data communication back to the radio itself. So if we close this, hit the second lever here, we've got our bigger storage compartment below. Again, just like we did on our red Ram. Now we've got some prep work to do on this console to kind of get it ready. And so we'll be disassembling this and kind of breaking it down, getting the sides and everything off. And the reason why that is that on this one here, just to show it to you, remember when we disconnected all the cabling and everything from this unit. Get the cables back out here. There we go. You notice we've got three. So we've got our USB aux and power, and also another power location for the other USB port. That's just power instead of data. But you can see we got 3 connectors there. We got one of our 3 connectors, which comes out of the side umbilical here. But on these floor consoles, the other 2 connections, the USB connection, which is this is our data and power USB connection, as well as our other powered connector as well, comes out the front. So what we're going to do to save ourselves some headache when we go to put this in the truck, rather than relocate these 2 connectors because they come up from underneath the driver's seat in our configuration, we're just going to disassemble this, remove the Christmas tree clips, and then we're going to take these 2 connectors and run them out the side, much like what was done with our jump seat here. So that way that all stays the same. All 3 of these will still connect underneath the driver's seat when we go to put our console in. Now the other item to look at, and I just want to show you, I got this off eBay, and I went with this particular one because the gentleman accepted my bid, which I was happy, was elated about. I believe it was a fair price for what we were getting. He agreed, and he has nothing but good comments on his storefront there, talking about all the parts are clean, everything is good to go. Everybody had positive, glowing reviews, and I have to say that even though this is a used center console, this thing is clean, and I mean it's almost spotless at this point. So I'm not sure what vintage a vehicle or age, because we can use a center console anywhere from a 2013 on up to a 2018, and we're putting this in a 2016. So if you're within that 13 to 18 range and you're looking at doing something very similar, then you can use a floor center console out at any 13 to 18, 1500, 2500, and I think even the 3500s all use the exact same hardware. Now you may have some differences in where your cables are located, like we do here, that we have to account for, and you may have to make some minor changes to it, but it's not too terrible. But getting back to this, you can see how clean it is. This thing was expertly packaged. I mean, well padded, plenty of room in the box, plenty of cushioning, and they even went as far as to put the front brace on, you can see here, and secured it so that way the sides didn't get mashed in. And they also zip tied, you can see a cardboard tube in between the 2 to also keep it from getting smashed in on the sides in shipment. So they did a very, very nice job of making sure that this was A, well cleaned, and B, very well taken care of for shipment purposes. The other piece I wanted to show you is that when you buy these, when you buy these console kits, you got to make sure that you get a couple extra pieces with it. If you're in a situation like we were, where we had the center jump seat, this center trim piece is different. You can see the difference here. You can see this dips down and becomes the part of the front pocket on the front there, and it also fastens in here with 2 Torx bits that come out of that center dip there. So this will match up and mate up with that center console, versus you can see kind of where this one ends, because it's meant to end just short of where you have a bottom piece of trim that then that piece of trim hits the carpet. So you can see the differences there. When you buy those center consoles, you want to make sure that you're getting the front and the rear bracket. You can see the front, again, commenting on the front brackets already installed. And on this one, they also went ahead and just installed the rear bracket. So we just have to unbolt that to get that bolted into the truck. And what we'll have to do is, the back one will take advantage of the 2 bolt holes that at least one, not 2, but at least one of the existing bolt holes, because remember, this one had 2 bolts on the driver's side. The rear back one there will be reused. The other one should already be in our truck. They're usually just covered over with a piece of tape. So we'll just take the bolt from the front, and it'll become the second bolt on the back that we need. So you want to make sure you get this piece. You want to make sure that you get the wiring harnesses that come with it. You want to make sure that you get the front and rear braces, as well as the hardware, all the bolts. If you can get them to send you all the bolts, that'll save you some heartache. As well as the trim piece that you see here. And then finally, well, not finally, but these are the two trim pieces also you want to make sure that you get with the kit. These will go up front and will kind of sit something like this on the sides, and you'll see this better when we go to install it. But this will meet up and clip into the side of the console and come up to meet the side of this trim piece as well. So we want to make sure that we get the left and right hand side of that, as well as on this one. It's also a little bit more unique because there's our vent piece that we were talking about earlier. This vent piece goes in place of the longer tube that we took out that was going underneath the carpet. It clips into the front bracket, goes into the HVAC ducting on the firewall, and then finally this will meet up with the ducting piece that you see inside the center console itself. So they sent us that, and you can see this is some of the other differences, and it's just because due to trim level, is that you can see that we've got more of a manual HVAC control. We only have a 4-speed fan in this one. And you can see we've got a lot less buttons down here. So we've got the tow haul, the rear park assist, and traction control, as well as the trailer brake adjustment. But you can see on this one here, there's a lot more options in the truck that this console was taken out of. For instance, they had heated and ventilated front seats. They had the heated steering wheel. They had front and rear park assist in this one. Same tow haul button, same traction control, and same trailer brake. But you can see another major difference here in this trim is this control. This is a dual zone automatic temperature control module. Now, it's some of the other upgrades we're looking at doing to that 2500, but not at this point in time, but it can be done. You can add single manual control and use a set of buttons like this instead of the rotary knob you see here. You can also add dual climate control into a truck as well. It takes some additional adapter harnesses and some additional programming, but it can be done. But what we're going to do for at least this round is that we're going to take this entire piece of trim you see here. So this is not the gloss black piece, but the matte black piece. So this entire piece that covers up the radio, all of this, we're going to swap it out with this one, so that way we'll retain our original controls. And we're also going to pull this out of here as well and just use our standard bank as well. Now, eventually at some point in the future, should we get a Laramie or appropriate trim level interior, meaning the front seats and the steering wheel, then we can revisit putting these bank of switches back in and actually converting the truck over to factory heated and ventilated seats rather than the aftermarket heated seats that we have now. But they did give us also the vents to put back in. Both gave us both left and right. And you can see that we'll have to also pop this piece out for our inverter, and then pop this piece out for our 2-wheel and 4-wheel drive selection, and those will just get popped back in place on our new piece of trim. So we got a little bit of work to do on these pieces, getting these components swapped over to here and swapped out. We got a little bit of work to do on our console, as you saw there. We need to get those wiring connectors routed out the side of the console, and we need to do a little bit of work on our third-party buttons for our heated and ventilated, heated seats. This was, if you remember, when we did the deinstall This is the component that was on the back of the seat here, and it's got our switches in it. So we're going to need to migrate these switches over to an area of the back cover on the new console. I think that's what we're going to do with them, because with them being on the back cover, it gives the individuals that are actually sitting in the back seats the ability to control whether they want heated seats or not. I originally thought about maybe putting both front and rear seats for passenger and driver on the sides, but I don't think I'm going to do that. I think what we're going to do is that we'll put the buttons for the front seats either here on top, because it looks like there's enough space. We don't hit any reinforcement or ribbing about a ½ inch to an inch in, so there's enough space right up here at the very top. Or looks like we got enough space that we could potentially just pop the existing switches right here on the side, and that way all somebody has to do is just kind of reach down and actuate what they want to do for heated seats. Plus, if it's over here, it also kind of keeps it out of the way of being able to be hit by the seat and anything else, versus if we put it up here, not to say that it would happen, but we don't want somebody to hit it with a cup or something and inadvertently turn it on. Not that that's that big of a deal. But yeah, that's what it looks like. And you can see, like, once again, it's a really, really nice condition center console. We just got to do a little bit of work to it. I am going to replace the little, I've got it popped out right now, but this is one of the 12-volt accessory ports. I've got a new one coming in because that one looked a little bit rusted, looked a little bit worse for wear. So no harm, no foul. We can either pull it out of the trim piece that we removed from the front, because remember, this takes the place of where the USB ports were on the front of that piece of trim. Remember, they were slightly below the trim, but you're not going to have those locations on this one. So we can actually reutilize those ports. We utilize those ports in here. Again, they're just a little bit rusted, so no harm, no foul. It's not a dig on the seller or anything. It just kind of comes with age and use, but we'll go ahead and swap them out with some replacements while we're at it. So I think what we're going to do, because we're getting a little bit long in this video, is that we're going to consider this a part one, and we'll consider this the removal and the review of what we're going to be doing to do the install. And then when we come back for the second video, we'll cover the progress of pulling these harnesses, these connectors out, and rerouting them out to the side, as well as prepping what we need to do to get our switches reinstalled. Yeah, I think we'll do it that way. Yeah, we're going a little bit long in this video, and we got our trim work to do here as well. So what I'm going to do, I'm rambled on long enough, but just wanted to kind of cover all that in a nutshell in case you're considering buying one of these consoles. Things to look for. The other thing to look for is that, remember, we got vents in this one. There are versions of this center console that don't have the rear vents. The reason why we got vents on this one was because that center seat had the rear vents for the rear passengers, so we wanted to keep that functionality. In all likelihood, you could just block off that port on the HVAC box on the firewall and go with a console that doesn't have it if you choose not to, but just kind of keep those little configuration options in mind if you're looking at doing this. But with that being said, if you stuck around this long, I do appreciate it. If you have not subscribed, please consider doing so. Our goal is to hit 3,000 subscribers by the end of the year, and we are fast pacing towards that goal, which is excellent. And if you have subscribed already, I do thank each and every one of you. And with that being said, I'll let you go on this one, and I'll bring you back for the next one, and we'll get into more install fun. With that being said, I'll talk to you later. Bye.